Is the Super Duke powerful enough to shut up nature? Nope. Now, if I was in the market for a hypernaked, there's a few things that I'd want. I'd want something that's comfy. I'd want something with plenty of power, a bunch of technology, but most importantly, I'd want something that's got a lot of view factors, something that looks fast, even when it's on the side stand. Because what is the point of getting a hypernaked if everybody else's bike doesn't look wimpy by comparison? But I wonder which one would be best at that. Probably that one.
Okay, so the Super Duke has a history as long, if not longer, than most of the other hypernakeds out there. The Duke as a product line has been around for as long as I have, first being announced in 1993. Back then, the Duke was a wee 609cc single cylinder which pumped out almost 55 horsepower, making it the most powerful single cylinder on the planet. It was designed as a supermoto, taking everything that KTM had learned from making hopped-up two-stroke dirt bikes and transitioned it to the street using the LC4 motor. In typical KTM fashion, they squeezed everything that they could out of the bike, making it a handful to ride, but it was light with a 320-pound dry weight and WP suspension on 17-inch rims, so it handled like a proper supermoto. Funny side story, apparently the name Duke wasn't decided on until KTM team members were literally walking down the stairs to go present the bike to the world. That is literally the most KTM thing I've heard in my entire life. They spent so much time making a motorcycle and zero time thinking about what to call the damn thing. That's probably why, in the long run, KTM's brand wasn't super sustainable, and they went through their entire restructuring thing in a recent Bajaj buyout/investment. Fast forward a few years and you get the first LC8 Duke in the form of the 990. It was a 1000cc naked bike pumping out 120 horsepower and 74 foot-pounds of torque in 2005. That honestly sounds horrifying. But hey, what's a Duke if it doesn't make you poop yourself every now and again? But hit that fast forward button again to the year 2014 and the year of the hypernaked. I always looked at 2014 as the year the motorcycle industry collectively lost their marbles and said, fuck it, comfy plus horsepower equals fun. Hence the Super Duke, so named because Frieza blew up Krillin with mind powers right in front of the Duke 990, and through the power of anger and constipation, the Duke reached a new level of strength. Probably. The 2014 Super Duke was putting down 180 horsepower and 106 foot-pounds of torque with a claimed wet weight of 445 pounds. KTM put just enough technology on the bike to make you think that it had your back, but in reality, it didn't. Rider aids just weren't sophisticated enough to keep up with how much power that bike made. You could override the wheelie control and the traction control so easily. And if you're wondering how I know, it's because I've ridden one of these bikes and almost looped the damn thing. It was one of the first bikes that didn't just command a rider's respect, it required it. But this simply wasn't enough. It needed more power. Enter the Gen 2 in 2017. Unfortunately, this was the living embodiment of the no go back meme with only 177 horsepower and 104 foot-pounds of torque. Sad. But it had better tech, meaning that you were less likely to accidentally loop it, leaving a stoplight. Then comes the third generation, which is the bike that we're looking at today. I'm going to focus on the R Evo because that's the bike that I have. In Super Duke tradition, it's got the 1301cc V-twin. It's making 180 horsepower and 103 foot-pounds of torque while weighing in at a claimed 397 pounds dry, but when you sit on it, it feels properly heavy due to a very high gas tank. We'll talk about all that later. The bike has all the modern rider aids you could want. Semi-active suspension, which you can adjust while riding, rider modes with programmable track and performance settings, and a big TFT dash from which you can control it all. The bike is a beast, but you may have noticed that one thing is absent from this diatribe. There's no reference to a sport bike that was sold alongside the Super Duke, and there never was. An argument could be made that the RC8R and MotoGP taught KTM some lessons that were applied to the Duke, but the Duke was only ever a naked bike. It's not derived from some sport bike, making it unique in the hypernaked class. Now, before we hit the road, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the folks over on Patreon and the YouTube members. Directly because of your support, I can not only keep my lights on, but the lights on over at Mario the Editor's place. I tried to get him to edit on a computer powered by a Peloton like it was a giant hamster wheel, but he said it didn't work out super well, so, we have to pay his electric bill. But seriously, thanks to the members and the Patreons, we've been working to keep pushing the video quality up, and you can join these people people if you want by clicking the link down below or just clicking that subscribe button, because watching the videos is enough for me. And with that said, let's get the Duke in the Twisties.
Now, putting a hypernaked in the Twisties kind of feels a little bit like, why? I mean, I get it, right? This is where you want to go to have fun on the weekends, but like, you can't push a motorcycle like this on the street, and that's not possible. At least I can't, not safely anyway. I don't really want to ride hard enough that, you know, I need all the advanced features on this thing to save my hiney. That's just not the kind of riding that I enjoy. But I'm not gonna lie, this thing feels sublime, man. I will note that I am on the comfort suspension settings right now, but let's do us a little menu dive and hop into the sport damping, and then it just automatically on the fly adjusts the damping and tightens the suspension up. Can I tell the difference? Nah, not really. Not in motion anyway. I'm sure that like on a racetrack I could, but it definitely feels, you know, very planted, very, very, very planted. This is WP Apex suspension, which is like the best in the business when it comes to the Super Duke, at least this generation. I'm sure there have been some updates made for the most recent model, but this thing on the side of the tire, it is so much more capable than I am, and I love it. But you'll notice I am currently in street mode. That is because this motorcycle has a neat trick. If you do not want to ride this thing on the bleeding edge, you don't have to. This isn't one of those hypernakeds where to really have fun on the motorcycle, you have to wring its neck and you have to be at the top end of the power band. Don't get me wrong, there is a biblical amount of power on tap here. Let's drop it into sport mode, which is not the most aggressive power mode. This just still has the sport throttle. There's multiple different throttle maps. There's track, sport, street, rain. But just that little switch, and you can feel that this bike is already a different animal. It just starts tugging at the leash, man. And if you're wondering why the wheel isn't coming up underneath me, that's because A, I don't have the balls to wheelie a motorcycle like this, not that effectively, and B, I ride with the wheelie control on because I prefer to put the power down and go that way versus look at the sky. That is 100% me excusing my inability to do wheelies by couching it in it's faster to not do them. However, I will say, when you're riding a motorcycle like this, you start to become very cognizant of the imperfections in the road, because when you're accelerating and you feel the road kind of doing its undulations and it's not being smoothness, the wheel is just hovering the whole time. It's coming up and going down and coming up and going down and coming up and going down the whole time. A bike like this has to be paired with some phenomenal brakes, because otherwise you'd wrap yourself around a tree, and this is no different. It is remarkable how quickly these things will stop the bike, and I have the anti-dive on, so you can brake even harder with the anti-dive, because it'll stiffen that front end up as you get on it progressively to keep you from tipping forward. My understanding is the way the anti-dive works is by just stiffening the forks and then allowing you to compress your front tire a little bit more and widening that contact patch and allow you to brake even harder, which yes, I 100% need all that braking technology when I'm riding on the street. Are you kidding me? Oh man, dude, this is one of the most enjoyable bikes that I've ridden with this much power. That's one of the things that, again, it's this magic trick that the Super Duke pulls. I think definitely part of that is because this bike has been tuned. It gives you only what you ask for. So if you ask it to be like, all right, I want to go fast, it's like, you best be ready, because I'm going. In fact, this bike is so confidence inspiring that I really want to take it out to COTA. I want to pop my leader bike cherry on a racetrack on the Super Duke, because this thing,
it really just feels like it would carry me through and just be like, all right, man, we're gonna go have some fun. You're finally gonna get your knee down because we're gonna be going fast as you're gonna be going fast only because I'm going fast though. So just so you know, I'm flattering your ego. Now, despite all of the awesome stuff about this motorcycle, and there is so much that I could keep mentioning here, this thing has its flaws, and we need to talk about that next.
Now, the first biggest pro and or con for this motorcycle, depending on who you ask, is the looks. I've seen so many people say that this thing looks cool. I've seen so many people say that this is the butt ugliest motorcycle they've ever seen. To me, that's the MT-10. There is no hypernaked more ugly than the MT-10. I'm sorry, MT-10 guys. You can tell me my bike is ugly. It's not, but that's okay. This is a very particular style, and if you are not about it, I totally understand this not being for you. Me personally, I kind of like the look of the Gen 4 even better, but those things are $20,000, so this was 10. Another con, this is kind of just general with hypernaked life, but the Super Duke specifically, you gotta have a rear tire budget because this thing is just going to tear them to shreds. I've put maybe like 500 or 600 miles, maybe 1,000 on it, and I can already see this Pilot 5 starting to square off on top. A lot of that comes down to too much of this, but hypernakeds and rear tires, they just don't mix. It is also worth pointing out, this has a 190 section rear tire, which is very expensive. I'm really not looking forward to having to buy replacements for this thing because that gets into the maintenance on this motorcycle. This is a bike that is a pain in the butt to work on because of how many oil screens and filters and drain bolts there are on this thing. It is more complicated to do an oil change on the LC8 than just about any other motorcycle I've ever done. This is also a hypernaked. You have to service this motorcycle. You have to do the valve services. You have to get in and make sure that this thing is running right. Otherwise, it's not going to run right. A lot of the people who claim to have reliability issues with these motorcycles, generally a lot of that, I'm sorry to say, it comes down to lacking maintenance. This is not a Honda. You can't just drop the oil. You have to do everything that the manual says, otherwise the motorcycle ain't gonna run right. I also want to talk a little bit about the technology here on the side of the road. It is really cool how much we have. There's a ton of stuff on here and it is pretty well tailored to the bike. However, you can't go in and change things like the level of wheelie control. Wheelie control is binary, it's on or off. A lot of the modes, you can't change sport mode to be the track mode throttle and the rain mode traction control. You can't mix and match like that in every mode like you can on a lot of other hypernakeds. But something like wheelie control, it stays binary. You can't set, I want to be at 30 degrees or 45 degrees or 60 degrees or 180 degrees. You can't change the level of wheelie control on this thing, really. And you can on the later models, but that is worth pointing out since you can on a lot of other bikes. Oh, also the quick shifter can be a little bit odd on this thing. You've got to be manful about it. It's a KTM quick shifter. If you're not being aggressive with it, it doesn't work that great. This is a big motorcycle. For me, big pro. For everybody else, probably not. It's also kind of heavy and you feel it when you're moving this thing around. So if you're not comfortable with a tall seat, specifically I've got almost no bend in my leg when I'm sitting on the bike, especially if I move back on the seat because the seat becomes really wide and it kicks my feet out. For me, when I mount up, this is the most comfortable hypernaked I've ever sat on. The previous owner did also drag this bike through the entire Power Parts catalog for the most part. We've got the $3,100 titanium exhaust and the race tune and the part that allows you to run the race tune on the street. We've got Super Duke double R rims on here. That's a big shout out actually to the people in the comments section who called that out. I did not know that these were the Evo double R rims. Another call out too are these levers, which I thought were just Amazon Basics orange levers. Apparently they are the Power Parts levers, which blows my mind because they feel like crap and they are $250 a lever. That is $500 worth of lever and it feels like 25. I did add the Power Parts seat though, the squishy seat. Also it's orange, so it adds 1 horsepower, so 181 horses. But let's see how all of this coalesces on the highway and I mean, let's be real, we're gonna do some big pulls. We're gonna go fast. Who wants to go fast? I want to go fast.
It's fitting that we're starting this highway section off by going to the gas station, because as much as I dig the Duke, one thing it does struggle with, especially when ridden in anger, is fuel economy. Now, I do realize that part of that is going to be down to the fact that this thing is tuned, and it does have the race pipe on there, but, you know, worth pointing out that, you know, I might squeeze 120 miles out of the tank. Another thing that's worth pointing out, too, is despite the fact that this bike is so powerful, and usually high horsepower motorcycles put down a lot of heat, this bike is no different. However, I will say it manages this heat remarkably well. You know, if you're just like sitting in traffic and you're not moving even a little bit, you will start to build up that cloud of just I want to die heat. But the minute you get moving, it cools itself right back down. Plus, the bike actually, it's really easy to tell what the temperature is, and I've never really seen it get the oil temp get above like 210 degrees. So it never gets truly hot. What is the Duke like on the highway? Honestly, it is remarkable how nice this bike is. You are hearing a lot of wind hitting me in the face. Part of that is because A, I don't have the windscreen on here so that I can put my camera rig on. And another part of that is I have a camera rig on here, which is making it very difficult to keep it quiet. But the bike itself is very comfortable. I even have the I have the ergo seat on there. I'm not sure if you can see the orange out of the side camera, but yeah, I bought the ergo seat, which is like 120 bucks, 150 bucks, something like that. For a motorcycle seat, not very expensive. You also have the comfort suspension going right now. I do end up sitting in 5th gear more often than not, just because 5th, more so than 6th, has a little bit more grunt. Because 6th really is like, all right, are you on a racetrack? Do you need to hit top speed? Because that's what that gear is for. The seating position is remarkably comfortable on the highway. Even though I have the bars in the forward position and this is set up to be as aggressive as possible, it's still super comfortable. I've done long days on this thing and it is so nice. Plus, cruise control. So on, set, done. The only thing I'll knock the cruise for is it likes to float around a little bit. If you set it to 83 like I have, sometimes you'll see, you know, 85. Sometimes you'll see 75. It sort of depends on kind of the bike's vibes at that point, what the road is looking like. There's a very wide range that the cruise control considers permissible. Something like the Ducati X Diavel. That thing's cruise control, if you set it to 83, it is gonna do everything in its power to keep you at 83. There's a wide range, but I have set the cruise control to 120 miles an hour, so there's some give and some take. Why you'd need to cruise at 120 miles an hour, I don't know. Maybe you're on the Autobahn, but I don't know, it works, and that's neat. It just goes to this thing being a shockingly good highway mile muncher, which, given this bike's manners, given the aggression that this gives you, you wouldn't expect this to be as good of a street bike as it is. And that gets me to my final point about why the Duke is so good at kind of everything. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot because I've ridden basically every hypernaked. There's a few that I haven't got my hands on, but every major one, Tuono, H2, Street Fighter, V4 and V2. I've ridden everything, right? And there's one hypernaked that keeps coming back to me as the single best street worthy hypernaked I've ever ridden, and it is the KTM Super Duke by far and away. Every other hypernaked, just, they're great. They're phenomenal motorcycles. But this thing is special. And what makes it special? It's because it's special. Now, that statement is logically incoherent, so let me explain it a little bit. what do we say about the Tuono V4? The Tuono V4 handles phenomenally. It's got a great power plant, but functionally it is an RSV4 with a, say it with me now, handlebar. The MT10, as good as that thing is as a street bike, is so heavily derived from the R1. The frame, the motor, everything about that bike is derived from a leader bike. The H2, the ZH2, that thing is derived from the H2R. In fact, I can't really think of another motorcycle in the hypernaked space that doesn't sit next to a fully fared leader bike with a lot of the same components. The only one is the KTM Super Duke. The Super Duke was designed solely and specifically as a street bike. It has no race bike competitor. In fact, KTM has endeavored to make the Super Duke as track focused as humanly possible, and that's why you have stuff like the semi-active suspension here, why you have the dialable modes, why you have all of this technological hardware in this motorcycle to make it more functional at the track. But anybody who's ridden one of these at a racetrack will tell you, especially on the bleeding edge, that this thing suffers compared to something like the Tuono, compared to something like the MT10, because this thing is not based on a leader bike. Now, when I say that this thing suffers at a racetrack, that's because it's somebody like Zach Kortz who's been riding this thing, who endeavored to be a racer himself. I would not be able to tell the difference because I am just a goon. But what I can do is I can tell you that a bike that is designed to live its life on the street, having as much fun as humanly possible, versus one that is originally intended for a racetrack, and then you bring it to the street, that bike suffers more. They're more uncomfortable, they're hotter. I can't spend all day on a Tuono V4. I can spend all day on a Super Duke. And I think that's why they've just stuck with this LC8. First of all, it's a phenomenal motor. Secondly, motors, developing a new one would take a lot of effort. But the only other option they really have is a V4. But they continue to stick with the LC8 motor because a V-twin is simply the best option for a street motor. They just are. They're fun to ring out, but, you know, once you get to the top, it's basically like, all right, I'm done, which doesn't feel great on a racetrack, but out here, totally works. As far as I'm concerned, this is the ultimate and final form of the street hypernaked. And that's why I bought it. And as I mentioned before, if you don't want to ride this thing like a fucking hooligan, let me pull up the modes here. And we're going to just drop it into street mode. And suddenly, I'm riding SV1000. But it's not going to tear your arms off and beat you to death with them. At least not right out of the gate. If you ask it to, if you wring its neck, it'll do it. It'll go full Wookiee mode and you'll just be bleeding from your stumps wondering what happened. KTM has done something amazing with the Super Duke. And this has been something that's permeated every generation. And I would reckon the newest one, it's the same thing. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this look at the Super Duke. This one is staying with me. This is my motorcycle. I actually went and bought it, and I've been slowly modifying it a little bit here and there just to make it the Duke that I want it to be. And I do plan on doing some road trips. Originally, I was going to take this up to Wisconsin for the Harley Homecoming Rally, but because of the weather that we've had here in Texas, I can't drive up there. I have to fly, and as much as I want to put this in my carry-on, I can't. But it will be coming with me to South Dakota, so there will be some Super Duke on Van Ocker Canyon, which I am looking forward to. That is going to be really, really fun. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about what you think makes for the best street bike. And catch you guys in the next one. See you later.